Alright, now that we've learned about simple invertebrates, we're going to increase the level of complexity. Take a look at some complex invertebrates. And those really include annelids, or segmented worms, and arthropods, which include a bunch of awesome animals such as butterflies and a lot of other insects and other things too. So let's take a look at it. First, before we take a look at those groups, we need to remember what makes animals animals. All of these complex invertebrates belong to the animal kingdom because they are eukaryotic, multicellular, movable or motile. They are heterotrophic. They don't have a cell wall, and there is a blastula during embryonic development. So these fit the bill. They also fit the bill of being an invertebrate, which means they don't have a backbone made of bone or cartilage. We'll learn about vertebrates next, but for now, let's take a look at these complex invertebrates. Really, we're talking about annelids, or segmented worms like earthworms, and then arthropods, which includes crustaceans, insects, millipedes, centipedes, arachnids. Both are really successful. If you look at the segmented worms, the annelids, they're a huge part of our ecosystem, and making the soil usable and accessible to plants, and then you know how much we all need plants too, so they're the producers of the world. So these earthworms are a big part of life on Earth. In 1 acre of land, earthworms process 16,000 pounds of soil per year. That's an incredible number, and like I said, they're really useful members of planet Earth, as are the arthropods. 80% of all known species fit in this arthropod group. Like I said, that includes insects, which is just a huge part of everywhere on the surface of the Earth, basically, or just about everywhere. Maybe not so much Antarctica, but hey, they find these animals having success in terms of numbers everywhere. It's an estimate that the number of arthropods that exist in the world today is 1 quintillion, which is 1 with 18 zeros behind it. So these are incredibly numerous and important to our Earth too. Okay, so what makes these complex? What makes them not a simple invertebrate? There's a couple things. One, they do have 3 germ layers with a true body cavity or coelom, and you can see that here. Echinoderms had this, but maybe they didn't have the fact that they're segmented. So all of these complex invertebrates have body segments. They change from head to toe, or anterior to posterior. So they're changing along those body segments, and there are different structures that you'll see that you haven't seen before with the simple invertebrates. So yeah, there's divisions among tissues and body parts here. So they're more complex. Alright, segmented worms, annelids, or annelida. These have bilateral symmetry. They're segmented, like we mentioned. They have 3 germ layers. They actually have setae for traction, and when we take a closer look at some live earthworms and those that we're going to dissect as well, you'll be able to feel that and how they get traction through the soil. So this segmented worm classification of animals includes leeches, also earthworms and lugworms, and yeah, they're pretty successful. I haven't had all that much trouble with leeches before. I've had one, and I'm sure a lot of you have stories about getting your blood sucked a little bit by a leech and not even knowing it's there. I know my girls have. So those are another version of another classification of segmented worms. Okay, now let's take a look at arthropods. These are different. They are segmented. All of them have a head, thorax, and abdomen. There's 3 main sections of the body that makes them arthropods. The other thing, they have an exoskeleton made of chitin, and even though that they're all various, there are many kinds of arthropods, they all have these things in common. So they have an exoskeleton made of chitin. It's really tough and good kind of body armor to have for these arthropods. And they also have paired and jointed appendages. So now we're looking at like legs and stuff like that. In some cases, a lot of legs. In some cases, about 6. So, yeah, paired and jointed appendages. You'll start to see a lot of crazy adaptations that allow for these arthropods to survive. I mentioned the types of arthropods that we're going to learn about. Those include spiders and scorpions. Then we'll take a look at centipedes and millipedes, and then insects and crustaceans. So those are the kinds of arthropods that exist on Earth. Spiders and scorpions, the main thing with these guys is that they have a cephalothorax, which means the head and the chest are basically fused together into one cephalothorax, and then they have an abdomen too. So these spiders and scorpions, tarantulas, that have 8 legs belong to this group of arthropods. Centipedes and millipedes are classified a little bit differently. They are arthropods, but they're their own group. And to me, these are pretty gross animals. Maybe it's just the fact that I just don't get how something can have that many legs and control over it. But anyway, centipedes, the prefix centa means 100, but they actually have 20 to 350 legs, depending on the species of centipede. These are poisonous. I don't think there's a lot of centipedes that live around Minnesota, thankfully, but they are pretty successful all over the world. Millipedes, the prefix means 1,000, but they don't have 1,000 legs. They do have 94 to 394 legs. So, and they have mandibles for chewing, which really are jaws and jaw muscles. So millipedes are have their own classification here too. All right, let's take a look at insects. There are more insects in 1 square mile than there are humans in the entire world. These are incredibly numerous, and there's a lot of different kinds of insects. They vary a lot, but some of the things that they have in common are listed on the left of this slide. They all have 6 legs. They all have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They all have 2 antennae. They undergo metamorphosis. So what they look like at the larva stage is a lot different than when you have a full-grown adult mature insect. These co-evolved with angiosperms. So those plants that really dominate the world probably wouldn't dominate the world the way they do without insects as well, and insects are pretty dominant themselves. So they rely on insects, those angiosperms, to pollinate and form seeds and fruit that will eventually help them stay alive and pass on their genes to other generations of plants. And they're extremely abundant, like we mentioned before. So those are insects. We'll take a look at a grasshopper later in class more specifically. The last kind of arthropod we're going to take a look at are the crustaceans, which include lobsters, crabs, barnacles, basically the insects of the sea. So those also fit under this classification of animal called arthropods. Some of them you would eat, and some of them are quite good to eat actually, but they're really like insects of the sea. Very similar to insects, but they live in water, and they do have a little bit different structural differences. All right, that's all.